Perfect. They can also email us if they would like at podcast
No,
at
it's
gmail
not.
at blah, blah, blah.
I'm going to change it.
No, you're not.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
No, you're
Yep.
not. Don't.
I am. You haven't got it right in a year and a half.
Shut up.
Welcome to AT Banter, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything regarding the world of assistive technology. With our hosts, Steve Barkley, Rob Minot, and Ryan Fleury. Now, let's banter.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of AT Banter.
Banter.
I am Rob Minot, and joining me today is Ryan Fleury
Howdy.
and Steve Barkley,
Hello.
and that's it. Just the three of us today.
Well, that's disappointing.
Why? Why? You enjoyed having Rick here last week, didn't you?
Absolutely. Nothing like having surly spice on board.
I like that.
Old Spice.
Old Spice, Surly Spice.
Tater.
Oh, God.
Yep.
Hey, I know what I want to talk about.
What's that?
Real quick actually, you know what? Before I launch into that, we should tell the fine folks what we're doing today. Ryan, what are we doing today?
Today we are talking with podcaster and assistive technologist Wade Wingler from the Easterseals Crossroads.
Cool. Before we launch into that, though, I noticed this. I wanted to talk about it real briefly. The new Windows update that's coming out October 17th.
The fall creators update.
The fall creators update. Yeah, it's interesting. They announced that it's going to have built into it a eye tracking software.
It's already there.
What?
I think you can already access the beta of it in Windows 10 that we have now.
Huh.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because people have actually been using it.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I thought that was kind of an interesting move on Microsoft's part.
Yeah, so just through a webcam.
No. It sounds like you still need specialized hardware in order to use it.
Oh, okay.
They're listing a few manufacturers that it'll work with. So, no, it's not just using a normal webcam.
No, pity.
So, but I mean, it's still a big move to actually have this software
Built into your OS.
built right into the OS. I mean, I think that's a definite step forward.
Yeah, it's
in
cool.
terms of
That'll be pretty important for a lot of quadriplegics.
Yeah, because normally, like eye gaze software like that was fairly pricey, right?
Oh yeah. It used to be like tens of thousands of dollars. I think it's down to about half that now for the specialized devices. But it's still pretty expensive.
But I mean, that's interesting though, because in general, the devices themselves came with the hardware and the software to run them. I'm assuming. So if this sort of removes that software need, I wonder if you'll start to see manufacturers just releasing the hardware.
Depends on how good a job Microsoft does of it, I guess. Some of the software that gets packaged with that stuff is often communication software, right? It's not just for typing or so forth. So I doubt that Microsoft will get into that, but there's will probably be more about just input methods and interfacing with the OS itself.
One of the really cool features that I was reading about with this software, though, is what they're calling shape writing, which it's a predictive typing, and basically it builds words based on the first and the last letter. So you can look at the first letter and the last letter, and then apparently just sort of skim your eyes over the other letters, and it will build the word.
Huh.
Yeah. I don't know how that would work in practice, but it sounds interesting in terms of predictive stuff. So, I mean, it sounds like they're trying to innovate, and
have to start somewhere, right?
And the fact that they're building this right into the operating system, such a very this is really niche accessibility software.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a great move. It'll be really interesting to see what kind of reception it gets once they roll it out in October.
Yeah. We'll have to keep an eye on it.
So joining us today is Wade Wingler. He is the Vice President of Technology and Information Services and a security officer at the Easterseals Crossroads in Indianapolis. He's worked as an assistive technology instructor, and he also hosts a very popular podcast called the Assistive Technology Update.
Hey, Wade, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Sure, happy to be here. I'm tired. If I fall asleep, if you hear snoring, just yell.
Well, perfect. We have to say that we're big fans of your podcast. When we sat around and started thinking about coming up with a podcast of our own, yours was one of the ones first, that came up as when we did a search for Assistive Technology podcast. So you're doing a fantastic job with it.
Well, I'm flattered. Thank you. It's it's one of my passion projects. I really get a kick out of doing it. So after 6 years, I do it all the time, and I love it.
6 years. Wow.
Yeah, I haven't missed an episode in 6 years. What kind of pressure is that, right?
Wow. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I think we're doing okay. We haven't. I think we missed 1 week in a year. So
that's great.
Well, listen. Let's dive right back into the origins and tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the assistive technology field in the first place.
Well, yeah, that's a good question because there are kind of two answers to that. One, I did it on accident when I was a little boy, and then I kind of got a professional job in the field later. But when I was a little boy, my mom and dad's best friends had 2 sons, and so they were sort of like closer to brothers than my mom and dad's best friends' kids, and we all grew up together. And one of those guys is named Andy, and he has a number of disabilities. He's on the autism spectrum. He has cerebral palsy, otherwise known as, we just knew him as Andy at that point. I knew he was different than the rest of us, but I didn't really know any more than he was just Andy. And one year for Christmas, back in, many, many years ago, this would have been back in the early to mid 70s, we got Radio Shack walkie-talkies for Christmas. Mm-hmm. And I got a big kick out of the fact that I would hand Andy one of those walkie-talkies, go into a different room, and when I would talk to him on those walkie-talkies, he would light up in a way that was different. So Andy's not the kind of guy who talks or doesn't talk a whole lot. And when he does, it's very focused on particular subjects. But when we talked through those walkie-talkies as kids, Andy would really behave differently, and he was very, very engaged. So I thought, at least at the age of maybe 6 or 8 years old, that I had invented the field of assistive technology. And it turns out that I just became aware of a unique interaction between that particular guy with a disability and technology. And so that memory sort of hung with me for a lot of time until I got out of college and was going to go to grad school and become a pediatric social worker, but didn't get into grad school, quite frankly, and had been writing computer software since I was about 8 or 9 years old and wanted to be a social worker. And I found an ad in the paper back when people actually used newspapers to get jobs, and it said, teach people who are blind, and back then it said, teach blind people about computers. And I said, well, that's interesting. Maybe I will do that for a year or so until I finally get into grad school and figure out what I want to do with the rest of my life. And that job was here at Easterseals Crossroads in 1993. And I took a job teaching people who are blind or visually impaired how to do screen readers. It was IBM screen reader back at the time. So fast forward, gosh, going on 25 years, I guess that's what I was supposed to do. That's what I've been doing ever since.
Wow.
And sorry, what was the name of the actual screen reader that you were using?
It was called the IBM Screen Reader. It ran on a micro-channel PS2 computer system running DOS 3, and it had a separate keypad. So it had like an extra numeric keypad, and that was what you used to control. It had a special card and a special keypad in the computer to read DOS.
I remember it well.
Yeah, as you were saying that, I saw Steve's eyes light up and the nostalgia flooding in.
Yeah, and then I started thinking about OS2. Did you
Yes.
you ever deal with that one too? Yeah.
You know what's funny? Right across from my studio here in the building, I have a little museum cabinet. I have several of them actually of assistive technology devices, and I have that very IBM screen reader keypad, as well as my Opticon in that cabinet over there. So for folks who have been in this business for a while, those are some oldies but goodies.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I used to fix the Opticons.
I think mine still works. I haven't turned it on in a long time.
Yeah, did a lot of replacements of those cables because they were fragile.
Yeah, early fiber optic stuff, right?
No, it was actually copper wire.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
So it must just blow your mind to think back to that, and then, fast forward to now and look at some of the equipment and software that's here now. Like, do you ever just marvel at the last 25 years?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, mainstream technology has obviously skyrocketed, and then assistive technology in many ways right along with it. One of the things I think about is some of the early optical character technology, right? The OCR stuff, like the early Kurzweil devices and things like that, and how now that's an app on your phone that you can get fairly inexpensively. Or I also think about for a while when the Kurzweil reader was a cell phone and a camera strapped together. I guess it was an iPack strapped to a digital camera to do those kind of things. Oh yeah, the technology change is dramatic.
And this is a common question that we'll ask people that have been in the industry for as long as you have is, what are some of the landmark things that you can sort of point to that really propelled the technology forward?
Well, I kind of tend to look at mainstream technology as those shared landmarks. I mean, clearly the personal computer was probably the first one that really made a big difference because it was so flexible and became more of a consumer product. That was the first platform that I saw where assistive technology really landed and dug in and did good stuff. But then you think about the mobile devices, you think about iOS, you think about the iPhone, and that one to me rises to the top as the platform that made the biggest difference in the world of assistive technology. And the fact that accessibility has been built into iOS from its early days is the big change. So I guess there's a technology change there that starts in the mainstream that trickles over into assistive technology. But I think both of those industry changes also marked sort of a business model change and a philosophical change where a small market like assistive technology finally found a foothold into a place where it could be more affordable and you could have, developers and support and things like that to go along with it.
And I mean, I think to add on to that, I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that companies have finally realized that there's a demographic out there that wants to participate in, consumerism, and they want to buy stuff and they want to be involved in conversations, and that companies can sell to, say, the blindness community if their websites are accessible or if they have product that is accessible. And so do you think that there's a little bit of that there's a little bit of corporations and companies that realize, like, hey, you know what, there's an added revenue stream here if we bake in some assistive technology or accessibility?
Yeah, I know that there is, but I kind of have an interesting perspective on that, because 10 and 12 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, I was saying to people that I knew, hey guys, baby boomers are, there's going to be a ton of baby boomers, and there's going to be age-related vision and age-related hearing and memory loss and all the things that go along with that. And so I thought we all need to hang our hats on age-related disabilities because of these baby boomers. And I see that, and that's clearly a reality of our world, that we do have people who are aging and dealing with the things that go along with that. But I'm also seeing it in schools, and I'm also seeing a whole lot more in terms of dyslexia and ADHD and those learning disabilities. And I'm kind of seeing accessibility become more mainstream in more places than I expected. It's not just the baby boomers. And I don't know if that's unique to my perspective and my experience, or whether the world is just sort of waking up a little bit more. It seems to be, the old adage about a rising tide raises all ships. It seems to be kind of everywhere. And I don't know if you guys have a similar perspective, but man, I thought it's all about the baby boomers, and I don't think it was.
Well, I know that, I mean, certainly, at the assistive technology company that we were involved in, that was certainly a conversation. Baby boomers came up a lot, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but I would agree with that. I mean, I think these days it's pretty amazing. It is bleeding into almost every aspect. And I think, from my perspective anyways, I think social media has a lot to do with it. And social media and correspondingly the online communities that have a voice now. And I think that inclusion has much more traction these days than it used to, even 10 years ago.
Well, it's much more easy to organize for advocacy now too, right? Because of that social media and email, all of these electronic interactions. It's, if somebody's really interested in lobbying a company, they can get people together to do that really easily.
And I mean, that's just a business adage that the louder the voice is, the more companies will pay attention.
Yeah, and as you guys talk about that, it makes me think social media and just the pervasiveness of information. Because guys, I don't know how to be a plumber and I don't know how to be an electrician, but we recently bought a house and had to do some of those things. And within 10 minutes, I'm on YouTube figuring out how to do things that I never thought I could do before. And that obviously trickles into the world of assistive technology. The sheer volume and availability of content out there allows people who have niche interests to have a platform and create that kind of stuff. So I think that that's a big important part as well. And as podcasters, I guess we should be acutely aware of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the other great part about it too is that, you have these communities that are sharing information and sharing, tech support even. Somebody can post in a Facebook group, look, I'm having trouble with my Braille display, I can't make it do this, and they can post in it, and within minutes they have other users that are responding to them and helping them through that. And I think that that's an incredibly powerful thing as well, because it used to be where, if someone was having trouble with their Braille display, maybe they could call a tech support of the manufacturer, but most oftenly not, they were just out of luck.
Yeah, I remember the days when part of your screen reader decision was, what are your friends using and what do the people in your school use, because you were going to need help and you needed to find people who knew it. And now you're just a few clicks away from finding community.
Yeah, exactly.
So say over the past few years, what assistive technology has really got you excited?
Well, it's interesting. I'm pretty infatuated with some of the stuff that's happening in the area of the do-it-yourself home automation. We've been playing around with environmental control units for years and years and years. And, in the past, that kind of stuff meant you're hiring a contractor to install things, and you had to have a server sitting in the closet down the hallway to be able to do things like home automation and open the blinds and, control your home theater system with voice or switch or those kind of things. And when I look at the combination of things like those personal assistants like Amazon Echo and the Google technology, and you combine that with smart appliances and plugs and some of those internet-based services like if this then that to do some of that home automation, it's amazing how in a weekend and a few $100s, I can do some pretty solid home automation that 10 or 15 years ago would have required, one of the 10 contractors in the country who really knew that stuff very well and tens of thousands of dollars, and would end up with interfaces that weren't incredibly reliable and was, like having an episode of Star Trek happening right in your house. And now that technology is something that I use in my house every day, all day, to turn things off and turn things on and access entertainment and news and information and remind myself and to do things. So I'm pretty excited about what's happening in that space.
What about even, like we were just talking about this earlier before you came on, the fact that, in the next Microsoft update, they have built-in eye gaze software right in the OS.
It's amazing. It's amazing to see how much of that built-in accessibility technology is showing up. And assistive technology. It's not new that our industry has robbed from other industries to create assistive technology. I've spent a lot of time monkeying around with wheelchairs and switch setups and some of those customized mounting systems, and that part of our business always robbed from the camera industry, right? People who can mount 35 millimeter cameras in such a way that they can take really cool nature pictures, create technology that can really position things well with a wheelchair. So I think that we're starting to see those mainstream technologies more and more have a commercial application that also works in the world of assistive technology is amazing. I mean, eye gaze really caught steam when marketing companies decided they wanted to see where eyes were looking on the screen to see which ads were doing the best. And that's when you got some money behind it and some market forces behind it. And that's done nothing but benefit people with disabilities who have ALS or those kind of things and rely on eye gaze technology.
Yeah, it really is fascinating when you sort of look at it, at how many things have actually crossed over. Like the fact that, text messaging in and of itself was something that was developed, for deaf people.
Well, yeah. And if you think about voice input systems like Dragon Naturally Speaking or now Siri, it was developed originally for people with disabilities, but it caught steam when attorneys and physicians wanted to use it to dictate their notes. And then voice rec got even better with the advent of things like Siri as it became a more mainstream product. So I think there's some back and forth there.
What do you get the sense of the trend in assistive technology? Like, is mainstream technology, are they really sort of latching on to the idea that assistive technology has gone from something that was like just a niche add-on to the fact that they're realizing that assistive technology can really benefit everybody and not just people with disabilities, that there are mainstream applications to all of it?
I think there are a number of things kind of at play there. I interview a lot of people who are developing assistive technology, and they don't have a background in the world of assistive technology or even a disability connection. I interview a lot of people who are just engineers and developers, and they bump into somebody for the first time who has a disability, and then and the light bulb comes on for them, and all of a sudden they're ready to save the world and make this new technology, and they have this epiphany moment, and I think they see it as a market opportunity as well. I think compliance has to do with it as well. I think there is legislation out there and incentives that help manufacturers try to be more accessible, but it's because they're reaching for compliance. IDEA and the ADA and some of those laws that have been around for a while tend to direct spending by schools and by government organizations. And so I think there's some compliance stuff there that drives that. And then I think there's also altruistic folks who just say, I want to make things more accessible, and I'm going to. But I think in all those cases, it's probably a combination of those forces. It's a little bit of each that helps drive that. But to, I guess, more directly into the question, I think so. I think we're going to continue to see more and more accessibility. I think there's a snowball effect there. You can't be an iOS developer, for example, and not be aware of the accessibility features built into the operating system. And so the more people see it, the more they're going to remember that when a need or, when they're developing a feature, when that comes up. So I think awareness is a big piece of it.
So from your perspective, then, where do you see the industry going, say, in the next 10 years? Like, what do you think, what aspect of assistive technology do you think is really on the cusp of being, just sort of propelling it forward once again?
Well, and again, I think there's a blending here of assistive technology and mainstream technology. I look at wearables as something that people are paying attention to. I'm wearing an Apple Watch right now, and there are like 3 things that I really do with my Apple Watch, but I'm still not exactly sure why it matters so much to me. I'm seeing people wearing Fitbits all the time, right. And I know they're counting steps, and I know it can do more than that. And so I think that we're going to see some things related to wearables and medical technology. I myself am somebody who wears an insulin pump, and so my insulin pump should be able, it doesn't right now, but it should be able to talk to my smartphone and talk to my Apple Watch. And Interestingly enough, a week from today, I'm getting an upgrade to my insulin pump, and it'll be the one that can both measure my blood sugar levels and then self-adjust to give me the amount of insulin that I need to keep myself sort of at a good level. So
Nice.
I look at that technology, and I look at my Apple Watch and my smartphone and my Amazon Echo in my home, and it's becoming more and more blurry about what is entertainment and what is medical and what is informational, and it's all sort of meshing together into this wearable medical information kind of stuff. I guess when my insulin pump starts playing my Spotify playlist, I know that we've gotten there, right?
But it is true, and I mean, we had a girl from the UK on named Molly Watt, and she has Usher syndrome, and so she's legally blind and deaf, and she uses an app on her Apple phone called Resound, which is it's basically a hearing aid, and it completely loves it. It completely changed her life, and it's using the Apple Watch, which I don't know, from a mainstream perspective, it made a bit of a lukewarm splash, I feel, on the industry. It didn't really set the world on fire, but yet as an assistive technology platform, it can be incredibly powerful. And I feel like the Google Glass is sort of the same way. We're seeing Ira using that as a platform. What do you think of some of these mainstream devices that get developed that can be sort of retooled for really powerful assistive technology devices?
I think there's a history of that. As you look at even the personal computer and what it did originally and what it can do now. I think we have to get those platforms out there in the wild long enough for people to get past the obvious things that they're supposed to do and start to think about some of those novel approaches. The concept of killer app has always been out there, but I think we're seeing less and less of those killer apps on some of those new platforms. Google Glass is something that I agree. We have it in our assistive technology lab, and we just don't exactly know what to do with it. We have concepts, but we don't see fully grown applications that really, excuse me, we don't see fully grown applications that really allow us to sort of put it into play. Ira, I think, is the first one that is really going to hit a sweet spot with us. But there's a whole lot of that going on, and it just takes some time. For me, with those kinds of technologies, I usually find that they do a couple of different things very well for me, and then they sort of just hang out there until the new thing comes along. So, related to our conversation about the importance of social media and larger, faster conversations, I think that will help speed things up as well. And I also think there's something to the fact that we haven't even envisioned what the new technology is going to look like, 10 and 20 years down the road. I'm not even sure that some of those problems have been defined yet. And the way our world is changing very rapidly right now, we may have some other problems that we need to be thinking about.
Have you been following the story about Elon Musk and his new startup wanting to build a brain interface?
No, I haven't been following that one. Tell me about it.
Well, it's not off the ground yet, as I understand it. It came onto my radar because there was a report in a newspaper that said that he had a bunch of investors on board, and he rebutted it, basically saying, no, there aren't a bunch of investors on board. And it looks like he's essentially looking to self-finance this company, but he is apparently made a commitment to starting up this company to do a brain interface, and there's been some rudimentary work done on that. The state of the art right now, I think you still have to have a conductive gel between the sensors in your head to make it work, which obviously renders it impractical for most disability applications. But with a guy like Musk throwing his money into the ring, that could advance really quickly.
Well, in his brain too, right? So
yeah,
he's got a
exactly.
special one. Yeah, I've seen some developments of brain interface technology, but my experience with it so far has been that it really is more EEG reading, and it's very off on 1-0 switch oriented kind of stuff, as opposed to read my mind and take dictation from my thought process, So I think that that's probably we're in the very early stages of that. And then you get into the science fiction piece of, do you really want an interface that goes directly into your brain, because there's a whole lot going on there that you might not want to share with the world.
No, I totally want that interface. I really do. It's going to take some really, really special filtering software to allow me to use it. But I want something that'll take everything that I've got in Outlook right now and stuff it in my brain.
There you go. I'm afraid that it might have some sort of a qualitative measure or a quantitative measure, and I might be disappointed because I might not show a whole lot going on there.
That's right. I don't know if I want to measure my brain activity.
Here, try this brain interface.
Is it on? Is this thing working? Well, that is that. I mean, there's so many different fields that are still in their infancy that are very exciting, but especially when you combine them, like combine the idea of a brain-computer interface with robotics, and all of a sudden you have the potential for actual bionic limbs.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of that going on already.
Yeah, there is. They're
mostly through nerve interfaces, not brain interfaces per se, but.
So it's a very exciting time. Who knows what the landscape is going to look like in 10 years? I mean, we didn't even touch on the idea of autonomous cars. We've talked about that a bit on the show before. Again, that's something that's a mainstream technology, but it could have far-reaching applications within the disability communities as well.
Yeah, and another area that I think has some promise and that I'm following and interested in, I teach a class at Purdue University that deals with universal design for learning for students. And, the whole concept is that you can create lessons and instructional materials that sort of have that curb cut, universal design aspect for everybody, so that the need for assistive technology is less if you've created instructional materials that are very flexible and can be represented in lots of different ways to students who have different needs, whether that's a sensory need related to blindness or autism or some of those things that impact sensory issues, or whether it's just more of an academic preference for a student. And when I look at those kind of concepts showing up in the educational world, I'm fascinated to see how technology and really the arc of technology is going to plug into that, because the more I delve into that and teach on that, I'm learning that you can really do a lot of good stuff when you're creating content, and in that context, educational content, to make it much more accessible and take out some of the barriers that we find when we do our bolt-on after the fact assistive technology solutions. And so I'm sort of fascinated to see what happens in that area of the industry as well.
Yeah, I think it will be fascinating because, for years, and I'm sure you've seen this, for years and years and years, assistive technology was always a bolt-on solution to some sort of mainstream technology. And if that thinking is beginning to shift and they're thinking about accessibility at the design stage, that could make all the difference. We could really see some pretty amazing changes in the next 10 years.
And the fact that we're starting to see that in the K-12 space, I think, is important, because I don't care how innovative a workplace you're at or what level of conference you're going to. We still have PowerPoint presentations, and people standing in front of a crowd giving that kind of information. And I think with younger generations who are going to be more immersed in these more flexible environments and these environments where multiple means of representation are the norm, I think that will trickle up into the workplace. And so when my grandchildren are running the businesses, I can sit in my rocking chair and look back and say, I remember when.
Are you kidding? We do that now.
Yeah, maybe a little.
Yeah. Listen, tell us a little bit about the Easterseals Crossroads and what you guys do there.
Yeah, so Easterseals Crossroads is a fairly large disability services organization. We're in Central Indiana, so we're located in Indianapolis, and we serve Central Indiana with most of our services, and the entire state of Indiana with our assistive technology services. So we've been around for 81 years now. We were started by a group of moms of children who had disabilities back in the late 1920s and early 1930s. And the idea was that back in that time in American history, kids with disabilities didn't get out of the house a lot. There were a lot of kids who had a special bedroom in the house, and that's where they stayed. They didn't go to school, and there was a whole lot of segregation among children with disabilities. And this very groundbreaking group of moms, forward-thinking group of moms, put together basically what we would call today play dates for those children with disabilities. And as those kids grew, they eventually said, well, let's put our kids to work, and they found work for those children to do. And that whole idea, that germ of the idea of people with disabilities being integrated into the rest of the world as opposed to stuck away at home is where we started. And that has grown into the point to where we now serve 5,000 to 6,000 individuals a year in Central Indiana in the areas of things like physical therapy and occupational therapy. We do employment assistance, helping people either go to work for the first time or providing supports as they go back to work after disability becomes part of their life due to injury or illness or those kind of things. We do sign language interpreting. We have a factory where we employ people with disabilities and people without disabilities, and they're doing packaging and assembly. And it's not a sheltered workshop, by the way. Everybody there makes a living wage and gets time off and benefits and those kind of things as well. And then our assistive technology program started in 1979. And we really were focused on computer programming training for individuals with disabilities. It was a really cool partnership between IBM, the computer company, a local university, and some other big employers like Mayflower, which is a moving company and a bank and those kind of things. And we were working on helping individuals with disabilities become computer programmers. And that grew into helping people with disabilities do all kinds of high-tech jobs. And then it's grown into a situation now where we have a pretty large and well-developed assistive technology program here. And we do all kinds of great stuff that I can get into here in just a little bit. But in general, Easterseals Crossroads is an Indiana-based nonprofit organization that does all kinds of great stuff for folks with disabilities, and it's a great place to work. I love being here.
Now, are there sister organizations in each of the different states, or are you guys fairly unique?
Well, so there are Easterseals organizations throughout the U.S., also some in Canada and Australia, but mostly a U.S. organization. And it's an affiliateship relationship. So in the business world, you would consider it sort of like a franchise. Gotcha. Each organization is a locally operated organization with its own board of directors, but we all agree to work under, certain guidelines in terms of standards of practice and code of ethics, and even things like how we fundraise and how we do branding and all that kind of stuff. So we all sort of report back to the Easterseals corporate headquarters, but we're all individual organizations. And that's kind of important to understand because what you see being done by one Easterseals organization could be pretty different from what you might see in another state. So there are a handful who do a lot of assistive technology, but more of them you're going to find are focused on pediatric medical services.
And what made you start up the podcast?
Well, so it's kind of a funny story, actually. We started the podcast 6 years ago. About 8 or 10 years ago, it got harder and harder to get funding to go to assistive technology conferences. So for 20 plus years, I've always gone to Closing the Gap and CSUN and right. ATIA and the RESNA conferences. And that's where you would go to meet colleagues and learn about the new technology and see the new products and, maybe go to a party or two and bring home a bunch of bags of stuff from the booth that you give to your kids or don't use. But it became harder and harder to get funding to go to those conferences. And so we decided that it made sense to try to take the information that was coming out in blogs and newsletters and emails and those kind of things, and try to share that information with people here in Indiana. So the first episode of Assistive Technology Update, which is kind of our flagship show, went out in June of 2011. And it was to be a 5-minute podcast where I would read 2 or 3 stories about some news item that came across my desk related to the field of assistive technology. And so that first show, and I go back and listen to it every once in a while, was pretty badly done. But the idea was just share a few little news items with the people in Indiana, and then it's just grown from there.
How big is your listenership now?
Well, we track all of our shows together. So we do 3 podcasts each month. We do one called Accessibility Minute, which is about a minute or so long. It's hosted by Laura Metcalf, who is she writes a lot of our blog and does that show. We do a show called Assistive Technology Frequently Asked Questions, or ATFAQ, and that comes out twice a month. It's a panel of 4 or 5 of our staff members or some guests that come on from time to time doing Q&A. So we get questions on our listener line and from various places, and we spend some time answering those questions. And then the show that I host each week, Assistive Technology Update, is now grown into a half-an-hour news program with interviews. It tracks listeners in about 165 countries each month, and we run around 10 to 15,000 listeners a month between those 3 podcasts.
Nice. He's got us beat.
Tell us how.
I think the secret may be do it for 6 years.
That, you know what? It's consistency, and quit looking at your download numbers. It's kind of funny because our when you buy an ad on the radio, right, 10,000 listeners is not very much bang for your buck. But when you talk about a niche topic like this, having 10,000 people who are interested in what you say on a weekly basis is pretty impressive. And so, it's not unusual to have 500 or 1,000 listeners on a day when we have a big topic. And so I tell my boss, who wonders why we have a studio in our rehab center, I said, would you be happy if every Friday 500 or 1,000 people lined up to hear you talk for an hour or half an hour on a particular topic? How would you feel about that? That would be good, right? So that's what we're doing is we're touching that many folks on a weekly basis.
I like that. That's a good way to look at it.
It is, yeah.
So, let's see, what else do I got? So now Assistive Technology Update in specifically, what do you cover in that? Is that just essentially just industry, the week's worth of industry news?
So Assistive Technology Update has kind of grown and changed a little bit. Most weeks, the format is it's a half an hour show. The first half, or maybe a little bit less of the show, are news stories. So it's, a new version of Jaws came out, or there's a research project related to, a kid building a Braille embosser out of Legos or things like that. In the middle part of the show, we have one of our partner organizations talk about an app. So we have partners at Bridging Apps out of Houston, and we also have the folks from AppleViz come on occasionally and talk about some new app in the field of assistive technology. And then the last half of the show tends to be an interview with people who are sort of carving out the edge of assistive technology. So, for example, just before we jumped on to record this today, I finished up an interview with a really cool guy from Louisville, Kentucky named Sam Duplessis, who he and his 14-year-old son have created a talking laundry module that plugs into GE appliances.
Yeah.
So we spent some time with Sam talking about that, and that'll release here in a few weeks. Before that, we interviewed a gentleman at the University of Toronto in the Institute for Aerospace Studies. He's developed a workable prototype of a self-driving wheelchair, and he's got video of this wheelchair driving around an office building, not running into people, not driving down the top of the stairs or getting stuck. And we talked about what that might mean for people who have a hard time controlling their wheelchair with a joystick or something like that.
Yep.
Recently, we've interviewed some folks over at understood.org, which is a fairly new web resource for students who have learning and attention issues. And we talked to them about the genesis of that project and how they sort of made that happen. Oh, and a really fun interview we did recently was with Beth Zebarth, who is the Director of Accessibility for the Smithsonian Institution. And we talked about what's the Smithsonian doing at their various locations and how does the Smithsonian help other museums and similar organizations on their accessibility. So I really enjoy doing the interviews. They're a lot of fun to get to talk to some of the smartest people in the world about assistive technology. But I find in doing that, we sort of paint the picture of what's coming, down the pike.
And, that brings up an interesting side topic. What's your impression in terms of there seems to be a lot more homegrown solutions coming out, like a lot more independent people who see an issue and solve that issue through just hobbling together solutions and then, taking that prototype and developing it into an actual product. We've talked to a few people that have been like that, like the Buzz Clip and the Smile Mouse.
Yep.
Do you find that happening more and more?
I really do. And it's sort of funny. Early in my career, I would have, at least once a month, somebody come to me who just knew that I worked for Easterseals and we do good stuff with folks with disabilities. And they would say, I got this idea. I made this thing in my garage. And it's because my niece, who has whatever disability, needed to solve this problem. And I solved it for her. And now I'm ready to be a rich inventor. How do I do that? And in the past, I would either connect them to one of the local university engineering programs who would maybe or maybe not take it on as a grad project and maybe or maybe not pop it into their business incubator and sort of help that inventor fully develop and fully create a product that could be marketable. I don't get those calls anymore, not very often anyway. What I find is people on Kickstarter.
Right.
And I find people using the power of the internet and social media to say, ooh, here's my idea, and here's how I'm going to save the world or change the world. And then through that iterative process of putting it out there and getting feedback and some of those more publicly available funnels that kind of get them to thinking about the things they need to be thinking about in terms of manufacturing and liability and all that kind of stuff, I think there are many, many more outlets for that stuff anymore. So I used to be frustrated with all these people who said, hey, I invented something that, and they were describing something that was already on the market that they didn't know about, was already out there.
Yep.
And now they can pretty quickly find out, oh yeah, there are 5 of those out there, and I'm not going to become a rich inventor on account of this, or they just go ahead and launch it on their own.
That's another really exciting aspect for the industry, is that there's just so many more paths to innovation. So
yeah, over the years I've had people bring stuff to me, but mostly for me it's been some guy with a interestingly shaped piece of wood going, look, this is ideal for saying, okay, dude, it's an interestingly shaped piece of wood.
Yeah, and sometimes it's 2 interestingly shaped piece of wood with some copper, taped to it and moving them together. So yeah, that's right. I think we know the same people.
All right. Well, tell us, anybody who's interested in Easterseals Crossroad or the podcast, where can they find you guys?
If people are wanting to learn more about who we are and what we do over here, I encourage you to check us out, especially look at our team and the amazing group of people that we have over here. Probably the best and most direct place to get that is to go to our website, which is Eastersealstech.com. So Eastersealstech, TECH.com. And from there, you can get to the overall Easterseals Crossroads organization. You can get to all of our assistive technology resources, our YouTube videos, our blog posts, our podcasts, and all that kind of stuff is out there. And then for the podcasts in general, those are on the platforms where you generally get your podcasts, whether it's iTunes or Stitcher or whatever your poison is in terms of getting your podcasts. We're on all those platforms. But Eastersealstech.com is really the best hub to get to all that.
And we will be sure to include that link in the show notes.
Thank you.
Wade, thanks so much for taking some time out and talking with us today. It was awesome to talk to you finally.
Guys, thank you so much for having me on the show. And thank you for what you're doing and how you're educating your audience, because, there's so much information out there and it moves so quickly that you can just never get enough good information out there. So I appreciate what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Wade, thanks again. And we'll talk to you again.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Wow, 10,000 listeners.
Yeah.
Ryan wants.
Ryan's going to get.
Yeah, there you go. 6 years. I mean, 6 years is a long time.
That is.
I mean,
yeah, that's persistence, and he's never missed a show. That's crazy.
it sounds like a great show. And I mean, although I'm a little surprised at how the Easterseals organization works. I didn't realize it was kind of franchised out like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know they're in town here. They've got a building on down by the McDonald's on Still Creek, but I don't know what they actually do there now.
But man, it's interesting to get a take on the field from somebody who's almost he's been in it longer than you, hasn't he, Steve?
No, I got 3 years on him.
Do you?
Yeah.
Sorry, Wade. Steve, gotcha. Amateur.
It sounds like he's really got a bigger breadth of experience though, because he's doing a lot of stuff on the physical side as well, which, you know, I've done some of, but not as much. You know, like I've never really spent a lot of time with environmental controls, for example. You know, I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've been asked to do ECU stuff. So.
But I also feel that a lot of and that's interesting that he sort of pointed to that as something that he's excited about. Because I hadn't really given it too much thought, but it is true. Like those environmental controls that were around 15 years ago, they were almost cost prohibitive. Those are really expensive, right?
Yeah, they were. You know, if you needed them, you know, people would find ways to get them. But yeah, if you wanted to do up a house, it was pricey.
Yeah, and he's absolutely right. Now you buy a Google Home for $200 and some apps and a few of the
different
modules, and away you go. You can probably do it for $500.
Well, It's getting even freakier. I was listening to This Week in Google last night, and Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, and Microsoft have done a deal where you're going to have a Cortana skill in your Amazon Echo. And so Apple and Google are also looking at doing similar things. You'll be able to talk to your Amazon and say, hey, Echo, launch Cortana. Then you can use the strengths of Cortana to say, Cortana, access my Outlook calendar or create a new appointment. So you're going to have multiple AIs built into your assistants that you can pull from. It's going to get crazy.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like 5 years we're going to be living in Star Trek.
Totally different world, yeah.
I don't want to have an interface that has multiple personality disorder. I want to have a single
and we'll get there, but right now each have their own strengths.
The word I'm looking for is
hot
avatar. I want an avatar. I want an avatar that I can interface with, maybe holographic.
Yep. Yeah, I'm with
coming.
you. Sexy English accent.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Hello, Rob. Oh, we're getting off topic.
Yes.
See, this is why those built-in brain computer interfaces wouldn't work well for us. We'd clog those filters.
That's right.
Yeah, sitting there trying to dictate a letter, and all of a sudden, porn pops up on your screen. No, okay, sure. I was thinking about porn. Yes,
that's right. That whole technology is going to prove to be a real problem for men, and women will be able to use it no problem, but men are going to have what's the old adage? Like men think about sex every something like 13 seconds.
Yeah, I don't remember. Don't know.
Yeah, ask me in 13 seconds.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah. No, right.
Okay, you guys can go now.
Hey, listen.
Just sausage.
All right. Anyways, hey, Ryan.
Rob.
Where can people find us?
Online at www.atbanter.com.
People can also email us if they so desire, atbanterpodcast@gmail.com.
And we're also on them fancy social media platforms like the Facebooks and the Twitties and Instagrams and YouTubies. That kind of stuff.
Yes, indeed. And I don't know, anything else you guys got before we cap it off?
Got nothing.
Ryan, you're going on vacation.
I am.
Where are you going?
Interior, BC.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Whereabouts?
Kelowna.
Oh, nice.
Help Linda's uncle out.
Don't throw any smokes out the window.
Yeah,
no,
really.
never do.
$575 fine, which I think is too low.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just take the car.
Yep.
Thanks. Well, have a good trip.
Thank you. It's going to be hot.
Yeah, it's supposed to heat up again next week, I think, right?
I think so. I think starting tomorrow. But like I said to Linda, once it changes, then it's changed. We're going to be into fall, and
Yep.
we don't really have distinct seasons. It just changes.
Yep. Then we won't see the sun again until February.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, the real important part of the season that has now started as of today, I have learned, is that the pumpkin spice latte is now available at Starbucks. So life is good again.
So crazy.
I was in Costco yesterday. They're selling Christmas trees.
I know.
Nice.
It's way too soon. Like, let's get past Halloween first.
Yeah, just bring on the pumpkin spice for me.
It's
That's all I
crazy.
care about. Pumpkin spice Oreo cookies, baby. Oh, they're so good.
They're okay. The recent ones I bought were cinnamon bun flavor.
Uh-huh.
They were actually pretty good.
Yeah, those are really good.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah, but the pumpkin spice ones are good. I'm hoping that this year the mini wheats will do the pumpkin spice flavor again.
Probably.
Fingers crossed.
We need the amount of flavors that the U.S. has. 'Cause I think Oreo has, what was it, like 120 different flavors or something in the U.S.
Do they really?
Yeah. Insanity. Like, we've got the birthday cake, the cinnamon bun, the pumpkin spice, the pop rock.
Wait, we have Pop Rock?
Yeah. Yeah, I saw it at Costco or at Safeway.
Whoa.
It's Pop Rocks in the Oreo cream.
Oh, damn. I'm going to Safeway on the way home. I did not realize that.
Yeah, I forget where we saw it, but yeah. It might have been Superstore, but
Yeah, they really they don't like to share their
No.
snack food technology with other countries sometimes.
That's
I get the
right.
sense.
yeah.
Like, please give us the Pizza Hut pizza Doritos.
Bring us your spray cheese.
Yeah.
We'll just have to do a trip to the U.S.
Aerosol cheese cans are the best.
No kidding. Now that's
It's Cheese Whiz in a spray. That's what it is. Yeah.
yeah.
You just take your celery, you go across the thing and start munching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Give that man a medal.
Yep. All right.
All right, that's going to about do it for us. Ryan's going to get out of here.
Yep.
He's got to go start his vacation. Thanks, everybody, for listening in. And I've been Rob Minot.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Steve.
And we will see you all next week.
This podcast has been brought to you by Canadian Assistive Technology, providing low vision and blindness solutions across Canada. Find us online at www.canasstech.com. That's CANASSTECH.com. Or call us toll free at 1-844-795-8324. For all your assistive technology servicing needs, call Chaos Technical Services at 778-847-6840 or find them online at chaostechnicalservices.com. Music provided by bensound.com.